Take them in order. Not getting in, is always disappointing when you have been there, because the difference and how it feels and all that. But under the circumstances, we kind of went back and forth all day. It kind of started last week when you had the two major upsets, when Gonzaga got beat, and then when there was a couple of other ones in there that were probably South Florida got beat. There were a couple of wrong winners that we knew would probably steal some at-large bids. We knew we were going to be on the bubble, just, not necessarily because of what people on the internet say, but because of what we've tracked over the years. We knew it was going to be really close. You get down and you hope that you're strong in one of the areas that the committee is going to take put a lot of stock in. I thought it was really interesting. The very first question that the chair got was, why did Stanford get the number one seed over Iowa? And the immediate response was they had 20 top 100 wins. So obviously top 100 wins was the separator between the 1 and the 2 seed, which should have bode well for us. We had 10. There were some teams that got in with 5 at large top 100 wins. There was one team got in with 5, and another one got in with 7, and 2 got in with just 6. So I don't know if the criteria changes as you start looking at large teams past the number 1, number 2. But you're always going to find something to be frustrated about. I just told the team, we'll talk about why we should be frustrated later, and I'll tell y'all, we can go back and look at games along the way that could have made the difference. 1 possession games along the way. We all know what those games are. We could have done things to not put ourselves in that situation. We'll address that in a couple of weeks. Right now, we knew we were going to, when we saw that we were the first team out of the SEC not in, that gets you the automatic NIT bid. It's an automatic qualifier. We won't probably know our opponent until really, really late tonight, or maybe even as late as tomorrow if they do release the schedule all at once. But our group, as a coach, you always want to gauge the interest level when it comes to the other tournament. And our kids were really excited to have the opportunity to play, and really the great opportunity to possibly host again and play in front of our fans in Bud Walton. We all know we used it as a springboard 5 years ago, to build a little bit of momentum that second year and play into the NIT and build some momentum. So we'll approach it that way. The last thing I'll tell you that I shared with the team is there's only 3 teams in this league who have qualified for the last 5 postseasons. I'm using the COVID year. Nobody knows what would have happened in the COVID year, but anybody that had a 500 record or better would have been in the NIT. So using that little nugget, there's only 3 teams, and we're one of them. The other 2 are South Carolina and Tennessee. So there's an awful lot to be proud of. I don't want us to look at the NIT as a lesser tournament. Some people will try to convince us that that's the case. We'll stick together like we always do and know that we're playing in the postseason and be proud of that opportunity. And then we'll learn from our mistakes later on. But right now we'll focus on whoever shows up on that bracket.
And that leads to my next question. You've got a bunch of starters and players returning next year, but to be able to still play for players like Chrissy and Avery, that this is it for them, the mindset going into not just settling because you are in the WNIT.
Yeah. Well, just making sure they have the facts. When the last bracket was revealed, there were still 22 minutes until 8 o'clock. We knew we were going to be here probably at the house. We watched it together at the house. Thought it was really important that we watch it, not knowing whether we were in or out. I gave them 22 minutes to feel however they wanted to feel. Be really, really pissed for 22 minutes. Be confused, be whatever. But at the end of 22 minutes, we're on to what's next. And that was at the NIT. So I'll be interested to see how kids unpacked it. But I know for Avery and Chrissy coming here, specifically with an opportunity to play in the postseason, she walked out and kind of patted me on the back and said, let's go win this thing. And, Avery was over there as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs with that music. That music was so dramatic, and she was just amped up. And but she knows where we've been, what we've done. And I think their reflectiveness will help the rest of the younger kids get through it. And for them, it's an opportunity to practice some more, play some more, be challenged some more. and give ourselves an opportunity to play in a tournament that has a winner.
And last thing for me, I guess, is just the disparity between the men's game and the women's game, where you got one team on one side of the hallway, 8 and 10, automatic lock to get in the tournament. There was no doubt. And then you got your team 7-9 in just as deep of a conference that it didn't even make the first four out. What do you say to yourself and your team to try to really, I guess, help that make it even better, I guess,
Yeah.
in a way?
It's hard, when you live in the same building like we do. We've got a really close kinship, and we were pulling for we always. That's the one thing about this group is they pull for our guys, and they were hopeful that there would be some crossover. But the only similarity is stops that we share a building. We don't even use the same formula. The NCAA doesn't even use the same formula that the men use to figure net. So you have to explain that to the kids. It's the same sport. We share a building, but it's a completely different landscape. I watched the men's bracket, and I started seeing, like, am I right that Texas A&M was like a 7 seed, and they were second in the league, and went to the championship game. So I don't even begin to understand. I would never, but I know our formula the best I can. They don't share it with us, but it's frustrating for our kids not to be able to compare those two. So I just try to educate them and let them know that it's figured differently. But the fact that we live in the same building, it's hard for them to get it and understand it. But we'll be big fans for our men in Des Moines, and pull for those guys. They play Illinois first, I think, and then in the Kansas bracket. So we'll spend our energy working, preparing ourselves, and cheering for them.
That's all I got. Appreciate you, Coach.
All right, man.
Ethan?
Yeah, just seeing some of those teams that made it, from the 10-11 spots. I know West Virginia kind of shot up there to 10. Did you notice any kind of trends of things you think the committee might have been looking at?
Not yet, Ethan. I'll have a better thought tomorrow. There may be a pattern, but again, I'm going based on what the very first question that the committee was asked. It turned to top 100 wins, and I thought, well, that should have been a good thing for us. So I'll listen to everybody. We tried to build our schedule based on what they've told us in the past. Go out and schedule good teams, schedule hard. We had 27 games against the top 150, which maybe is too many. I don't know. I'll spend the summer evaluating all that and making sure we give our kids the best schedule we can. But you do start. I will look at those 11 seeds first and do my best to try to match up what it was that we did or did not do. I'll seek out any opinions, any input I can get from anybody to try to help us for the future. Like I did say to our kids, though, just in very brief passing, we'll address it more in depth. We can keep ourselves from being in that situation. Let's finish the game against Oregon. Let's do some things against the Ole Miss game. Let's do some things in Alabama. Let's do something differently at LSU. Let's win one of those really, really close games and see what happens. So we know that there's things we could do that we could control and things that we can't. We'll try to focus on the things we can control, deal with the things that we can't. There's always frustration. We were in this spot 4 years ago, I guess. No, 5 years ago when we were on the debatable 8 again. It's a little bit of a moving goalpost, all the time, but we'll do our best to figure out what separated Purdue, St. John's. I was really shocked Mississippi State fell to 11. So we'll do our best to see what separated the teams that got in on those last seeds and the teams that got left out.
And of course, like a natural question, I think that comes to a lot of people's minds, just getting team motivated, after something so devastating like missing the tournament. Do you bring up, the 5 years ago? I know Aaron was a redshirt on that team. Michaela was committed, so was of course watching what was happening. You bring up, that next year team, had it not been canceled, would have been destined for a pretty high seed.
I think you do, and not only you talk about yourself, you talk about Indiana. Indiana won the NIT a couple of years ago. Now they're a 1 seed. Arizona won the NIT and they went to the Final Four. There are other there are other teams that use the NIT and then went the other direction too. So you got to be realistic. You got to tell them what it's about. But judging by the way they handled the information, the news, I was excited for practice tomorrow because it was let's get after it. Let's go be that team that, proves that maybe we should have been in, go win that. If you go and you lose your first or your second round, then you don't really have much to talk about. You can't back it up if you don't go with that attitude. So, the WNIT is a tricky thing because it's not necessarily seeded. A few teams will have a seed line, but then it becomes very regional from that point on. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, your first round game could be against a team that's really good as well. It's not like the rest of the brackets. So I will use Aaron, I will use Avery, and then we'll use all of our other stories of, coaches that have been in the situation, just so we can have our kids, not thinking too much, but prepared.
That's all I got. Thanks.
All right.
Anyone else?
Hey, Mike, is it your expectation that you would play at home for several rounds? Do you have a preference beyond a couple of rounds?
It's tricky. It all comes down to availability and who you're playing and things like that. Most years you say, let's host them all. But that's asking an awful lot. I also know that we've played okay on the road this year, but for our fans, I've had a number of people, even yesterday and last night, being out around a little bit, people saying, hey, the only positive thing about making the NIT is we get to see you play again. So I don't have any expectation. I haven't talked to anybody yet about it. We were just going to wait and see. So we'll get on the phone later tonight and tomorrow. But I would certainly think we'll have the opportunity to host the first round for sure. And then a lot of that comes down to how well attended it is. If your second round opponent drew a lot more, the NIT they're not part of the NCAA yet. I think they're headed toward that next year. That's another difference between us and what they do on the men's side. So we'll see where it goes, Brett. But I think the first one you could anticipate that. And then I think after that, it's just kind of a wait and see.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.